皆さんこんにちは。UTEC がお送りするポッドキャスト番組テックスタートアップの舞台裏、パーソナリティのIinumaです。この番組ではテクノロジーやサイエンスに強いシードアーリーフェーズのスタートアップを中心に投資活動を行う UTEC が毎回起業家をゲストに迎え、担当のベンチャーキャピタリストとともにテクノロジースタートアップの裏側を語っていきます。さて今回は初めて海外投資先企業をゲストにお迎えします。UTEC は実は海外投資先企業も多く、全投資先の約3分の1程度が海外なんですけれども、その中で今回はシンガポールベースのユーレカロボティクスの CEO であるクオンをお迎えし、担当のベンチャーキャピタリストであるキランとともにトークしていきたいと思います。ということでこの後は英語にスイッチしていきますけれども、ぜひ引き続きお楽しみください。Hello English audience, welcome to the UTEC podcast. My name is Maiko Iinuma, HR at UTEC. In this program, we invite entrepreneurs as our guests and dive deep into the stories behind their ventures with our venture capitalists. Today, we're thrilled to have Quang, the CEO of Singapore-based robotics company called Eureka Robotics, join us. I have our venture capitalist Kiran Mysore with me today as well to share the journey with Quang. So hi Quang and Kiran, thanks for joining us today.
Great. Yeah,
Hello.
it's our first time we are doing it in English. Very excited. So, hello everyone. My name is Kiran Mysore. I'm a principal at UTEC. I mostly look at our international investments. I've been at UTEC for the last 7 years now, and I'm an AI researcher turned venture capitalist. So, I'm pretty excited about investing in AI companies at the intersection of physical world touching the digital world. I tried my hands a bit at entrepreneurship, didn't work. So the best way to predict the future is to invent it, but the next best way is to invest in it. So I switched to the investing side, and great to be part of this.
Hey, hello everyone. My name is Quang Pham. I'm from Vietnam, currently based in Singapore. Previously, I was a professor at NTU. NTU Singapore is a university in Singapore, and doing research and teaching in robotics and AI. And about 6 years ago, together with the colleagues from my lab, we started the company Eureka Robotics to commercialize our research from the lab to the shop floor. And along the way, we have been receiving the support from UTEC. So it's my great pleasure to be here today and exchanging with Kiran and Iinuma-san from UTEC.
Yeah, we'll discuss more about Eureka at length. So maybe can you give a 30-second description of what is it that you do at Eureka Robotics?
So at Eureka Robotics, we are trying to tackle the most challenging automation tasks in manufacturing. So basically, we are leveraging the latest technologies and research in robotics and AI. And we use that technology to automate tasks in the manufacturing, on the manufacturing shop floor, tasks in particular that haven't been able to be automated with existing technologies.
Sounds great. Yeah, looking forward to learning more. So let's begin with your background, Cuong. You have a very nonlinear journey spanning Vietnam, France, Japan, and Singapore as well. Can you walk us through early part of the journey of your life? How was it growing up in Vietnam? Did you have any dreams? What made you move to France for your studies? That'll be helpful.
Sure. So I was born in Vietnam in the 80s, and at that time Vietnam was a very poor country. And I mean, maybe to start my journey in robotics, the first thing that got me into robotics at that time was reading Doraemon when I was in primary school. So that was my first contact with robotics and Japan, and it made a huge impression on me. And I think this is why profound reason why eventually I started. I start to do robotics, and with a lot of connections to Japan.
I just remember that Doraemon was a robot.
Yeah, Doraemon is a robot cat coming from the future.
Cat.
Doraemon was your Eureka movement.
Eureka movement.
Yeah. Exactly, yeah. And so when I was 11, together with my family, we moved to France. And the main reason was that my father wanted to give us, myself and my younger sister, access to a great education system, way better than what we had in Vietnam at that time.
It's an immigrant stories that way.
Yeah. So from 11 to 18, I was doing all my studies in French high school. And when I was 18, my father basically says, mission accomplished. Now we go back to Vietnam and you stay here and you do you are on your own. So basically from there on, I entered university in France with a focus on physics, math, and computer science. So I ended up doing a PhD in neuroscience, but more from a computational neuroscience viewpoint, in particular,
Cool.
using methods from math and computer science to understand human movement, the way humans calculate and implement their motions.
Very cool. Yeah, math and physics are foundational sciences. So it's that kind of laid foundation, I guess, for Eureka much down the line. So you spent probably some of your formative years in France, and then it led you to Japan. So around 2010 is when I believe you decided to do a postdoc here in Japan. So let's talk about your journey. What made you come to Japan in the first place?
So as I mentioned, I always wanted to do robotics and something with, in Japan. So after my PhD, I really wanted to go to Japan for the postdoc. And to me, the postdoc was an award for the hard work I put in the PhD. So I did a good PhD. Now it opens the possibility to go to a good lab in Japan. So that's how I applied to a scholarship by the Japan Society for Promotion of Science,
JSPS, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that fund as a government grant that funds young researchers to come over to Japan and do their research with like no strings attached. So it's really great.
Wow.
Scholarship.
Okay.
And then I came to and was honored to be accepted in Nakamura Sensei's lab at the University of Tokyo. And my idea initially, when I joined Nakamura Lab, was to use Nakamura Lab is a hardcore robotics, humanoids, industrial robotics, very broad research in robotics lab. So my idea was to use the knowledge that I have acquired in neuroscience to see how we can use that and apply to improve robot motion control, robot motion planning, etc. So that was the initial idea. But then, the turn of events made that I eventually did none of that, and it was really focused on industrial, hardcore robotics.
It's interesting, right? Though your background was neuroscience, sort of you coming to Japan was probably quite foundational to the Eureka Robotics that is currently today, because that sort of maybe moved you from not just the computational neuroscience, physics, and mathematics, but to robotics. So I think kind of you can only connect the dots looking backwards, right? So that was probably quite instrumental in your interest in robotics.
Yeah, I always had some interest in robotics. I wanted to do that, but I was not exactly clear because robotics actually it's still a very broad field with many different subfields. You have humanoids, you have robot arms, you have flying robots, drones, UAVs. So I wanted to do something in robotics, and by chance and good chance, by good luck, I ended up in Nakamura Lab and doing the research that I really liked.
Okay, yeah, and this is an interesting interjection now. So University of Tokyo has a couple of interesting robotics lab. One of them is, of course, Nakamura Lab, which you were a postdoc in, which was focusing on industrial robotics. But around the same time, a researcher named Rosen in Iinuma Lab of University of Tokyo, which is more focused on the warehouse automation, had co-founded a company, incidentally funded by UTEC, named Mujin. And I believe you had some interesting conversations with Rosen and Iinuma Lab at that time, right? Can you unpack that?
Yeah, absolutely. And full disclosure, it was Rosen who got me into industrial robotics.
Wow, this was
12
years back, 12, 13 years back.
It was back in, I think early 2011.
Okay.
He was still postdoc at the Iinuma Lab at that time. So basically, Rosen was on the same scholarship as me, JSPS, but he was 1 year my senior. He joined Iinuma Lab 1 year before. And I was, I just arrived in the lab. I was looking for potential projects to do. And I got this call from Rosa and say, hey, we are on the same program. Let's talk. And Iinuma Lab is just across the door from Nakamura Lab. They have some kind of rivalry, but
Hmm.
kind of frenemies. I can say that.
Frenemies type of a
Yeah.
thing. Yeah.
And he was really deep into industrial robotics at that time, and he already I think had the idea of starting Mujin already. So so he really sparked my interest in motion planning, and I started to delve into that and find a lot of very interesting topics that was very appealing to me. And eventually, when Rosen and Issei started their company Mujin, they actually approached me to work with them at the very early stage of the company.
I see.
But of course, at that time, I had no idea about startups or no entrepreneurship. I was really deep down an academic person. So I said, no,
Okay.
Rosen, sorry about that, but I'm gonna stay in academia, but I can help you. And so that's why I was one of their first scientific advisors. And I contributed to keeping them connected to academia from my
I see.
position of a researcher. So that's how, that's the story behind it.
You wanted to pursue an academic career and maybe Nobel Prize, but it became something else later. And that was also the time Denso, which later became Eureka, spent long back. Probably that was the time you started interacting initially with some of the Japanese corporates and looking at that as well, right? Maybe some of the projects that you worked on in Nakamura Lab.
So Denso actually was used mostly by Mujin actually. And they had the robot model ready. They had a hardware platform. So that's how one of the first robots that I started to work on was the Denso robot. Later, when I came to Singapore, of course, because I was already familiar with Denso robots, I approached them again and say, hey, let's do something together. We start to purchase a few robots to do research in our lab. And then little by little, we get to know some of their researchers, some of their development team members. And then that started a very good partnership.
I see. So you spent 3 years in Japan, I believe, then, right? 2010 to 2013. It kind of laid the foundations for Eureka. You rekindled your interest in robotics. You got deep into some of the things. But then I believe at the same time, 2011, there was the Great Japan earthquake in Tohoku, which sort of led you to make a personal decision. So maybe you can let our audience know about it.
Yeah, I mean, when the earthquake happened, I remember it was maybe late morning. I think it was around 11.
Yeah.
Were you in your lab?
I was on the 8th floor of the engineering building number 2.
Yeah.
And it's as you know, maybe if you are from Tokyo University, it's a very interesting building that is built on top of stilts.
Yeah.
And the stilts, I think I heard a story that they are built in such a way that they have much more degree of freedom than a solid structure, which is to absorb shocks, absorb this kind of earthquake. But when you are there and then the building started to move by meters, sideways, and you feel really scared. But we logically we know that this is to absorb the shock and then we don't risk anything. But it was a huge earthquake, and it was really, really scary. And around that time, actually, my girlfriend at that time, she was working in the Netherlands, and we were in a long distance relationship. There was this earthquake happening. Then after that, there was all the scare around the Fukushima nuclear plant number 2. Everybody from Vietnam was calling me and say, hey, Cuong, you have to get back home now. So I took a flight back home. My girlfriend, at that time, also took a flight from the Netherlands back home. And at that time, we were saying, there's some crazy things that can happen in the world. So why don't we get married now, and then we can live together in Japan and make sure that anything that happens, we are together. So
seize the day.
How, so it the earthquake kind of sealed the fate. Sealed the deal
probably.
For me.
One of the most important partnerships in your life, probably.
Absolutely. So we got married in end of 2011.
Very cool.
And then we spent after that we spent still a year and a half more in Japan together. It was probably one of the best periods of our lives.
Very cool.
Because we are young, no kids yet, no string attached, starting to make some salary and living in a fantastic city. So it was really good.
Tokyo is great. So you did that until 2013, and then you moved to Singapore. So Nanyang Technological University, short for NTU. That is where, so from 2013 onwards, you set up your own lab in Singapore, first, I believe, as an assistant professor and then as an associate professor, right? So were there any differences in the academic cultures between University of Tokyo or Japan in general and Singapore?
Yes, a pretty big difference. So at that time, I was thinking about, of course, moving to the next position, which would be like a more professor position from, I was a postdoc before. And, you know, I was weighing several options, could be in Japan, it could be, I wanted to stay in Asia, basically. So, but the culture in Japan is when you are an early stage, early career researcher, it's very hard to have your own lab where you can have your own research. You actually, you need to join a big lab with a big professor and then make your way inside the lab. But at the same time, NTU in Singapore, and most of the universities in Singapore actually were more on the US model, where young researchers can join and start their own lab and have all the freedom to choose their
that's nice.
Their research topics. So that was a very compelling offer, and for me it was good because we, for my family, we wanted to stay in Asia, being in an English-speaking country, and have good conditions to carry out research. So that's how I joined NTU, and our family moved to Singapore.
And one of the interesting things that happened is probably the one that put your lab on the global robotics map. And the first time I read about some of the work that your lab was doing was you did the IKEA chair assembly. Your lab did the IKEA chair assembly without external supervision, which was published by Science Journal. I think it became really popular. CNN, New York Times, everyone published an article, BBC, Bloomberg, and so on and so forth. So that was quite foundational. Probably that was one of the first times you started thinking that this could potentially be a company, right? Can you talk us about that?
So actually, the first proposal I wrote when I joined NTU was, can robots assemble an IKEA chair?
Okay.
Right? So when I joined NTU, that was my first proposal. Now the idea there is not to accomplish that and sell that to IKEA. This is not their business model, right? IKEA business model is to have
people assembling themselves.
Spouses assemble and have arguments about it. But the main idea was to set to ourselves a very ambitious target at that time. Actually, even now it's not easy.
Correct.
With all the advances in AI and robotics, it's still not easy to do that. But at that
or
time,
or for humans as well, it's not easy.
It didn't change for humans that much. But at that time for robotics, it seemed it was like something, and MIT had an article on that. They call it the moon landing for robotics at that time. And so our goal was to set to ourselves a very ambitious objective and then let that drive all the research. So basically we set that as an objective. But along the way, I think we published like more than 30 or 40 papers in journals and conferences.
In span of 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, in many different fields, like computer vision, robot motion planning, force control. Because to accomplish that ambitious goal, we had to develop a lot of technologies that can support that vision. So that drive that drove our research during the 3 or 4 years from when I joined NTU to the publication of the paper.
And so around that time, you probably started thinking about Eureka. So why did you start Eureka around 2018, was it? And what was your original vision of starting Eureka?
So when we published the paper in Science Robotics and had a lot of coverage, it's kind of the end of a phase, in my own academic career. Some kind
looking for the next challenge.
Project, we deliver that. So my question was, okay, what's next? And
moon landing is done. Next is Mars landing, maybe, or something. The Mars landing challenge.
So the question that I asked myself is, okay, do I want to improve upon that, doing something deeper in terms of research, or do I want to do something completely different? And so that's the question that I was asking myself at that time. And at the same time, NTU and Singapore in general has a very strong policy to support entrepreneurship. So everybody was talking about, commercializing your research, and then
startups,
there's a whole ecosystem inside NTU to support researchers and professors. And there's really a good, ecosystem and policy from the university to support this kind of endeavor. So I was asking myself this question, and there was this opportunity. So I just say, okay, how about we try out? There's nothing to lose, so let's see how far we can go. So that's basically, and then what we did was we obtained several grants to so that we can look for potential commercialization,
like industry projects,
deals, industrial projects. And as part of that, we started to pitch our technology to companies around,
like Denso and others.
And the way it worked is, we pitched to like maybe 100 companies about our research.
Okay.
We did this IKEA chair. It's very complex. What can we do for your company? What kind of tasks we can automate? But we didn't start any company that at that time yet. But then one day, I remember I was still at the canteen of NTU, and I got the call from Daniel. He's an engineer at Coherent, whom we pitched like several months ago.
Coherent is a US company, in the optics space.
In the optics space. So he called me on the phone and said, "Hey, Cuong, you remember the project you pitched us a few months ago? We just got the approval from US to go ahead." Say,
wow.
Okay, all right. Give me a minute. Give me a few days. I'm gonna incorporate the company, open a bank account, and then you can wire the money.
You didn't have the.
It was
the customer.
literally, how it happens. Like we had no idea what we were doing.
Company, right?
Exactly. So, and because the advice that we got, and I think is good advice, is stay as long as possible in the university until you cannot stay anymore. And for us, until we cannot stay anymore, is we get the first purchase order from Coherent. So then we have to start the company.
Having customer and no company is better than having company and no customer.
Exactly.
It's the so that sort of kickstarted the lab to market phase, right? So from lab, you started sort of getting into the market. You set up the company. Maybe now is a good point to talk about some details of Eureka Robotics. What are some of the key sectors you're tackling? What are the applications that your Eureka Robotics is doing, especially in the initial stages of the company from 2019 to 2021?
So basically, while we are developing this project for the IKEA chair assembly, we developed a lot of different technologies, but we didn't know what was relevant, what was differentiated, in the and what was required, what is needed in the market. So actually, this first customer really drove our market discovery, and because as a new company, we didn't have any reference at all. So why does this company choose us over so many other robotics companies that are out there, or their system integrators? And then we dive into their request. So they had this request of picking small lenses and inserting them into a jig. So basically,
sort of
it's
a high accuracy task.
Very high accuracy task,
which is different from a warehouse robotics task, right?
I see.
That's the difference.
And they have been trying to automate that for the last 10 years before they got to us. And then we asked ourselves, so why this task is so difficult to automate? And we realized that because of two components. First of all, our customer have 60,000 different types of lenses, hundreds of different types of jigs, of holders, of lens holders. So it's impossible for them to automate in the traditional way. So in the traditional way of automation, you teach the robot a set of motion, and then the robot will repeat that motion over and over again. But given the sheer number of potential of all their lenses, all their holders, there's no way you can pre-program all of that.
It takes forever, right?
It takes forever to program that. So we need a system that is adaptable, that is agile. Okay, so that's the high agility part. High agility. At the same time, picking up the lens and inserting them into the hole was need very high degree of accuracy.
Like 0.2 mm or something like that.
80 micron. The hole is
80
micron bigger than the lens. So this is the high accuracy part. And we realized at that time that some companies can do high accuracy but low agility, right? Like traditional companies, traditional automation companies. And then there are all the warehouse robotic companies who can
including Mojin and others.
Yeah, and low accuracy. But no company had the technology to do high accuracy, high agility at the same time. And this is why those guys were not able to, our customer were not able to automate that. And that's why they chose us, because we showed
Yeah.
during the IKEA assembly that we could use.
Yeah. We can add a video for the listeners in the show notes.
Oh yeah, we can put the link on the episode URL.
Yeah, we can do that. So Eureka, this is how sort of, or one of the pioneers of the what we call the high accuracy, high agility robotics automation. So you don't focus so much on the warehouse type of industries. You focus on optics, automotive, electronics. That sort of is your core, right?
That's right. So after we have seen that, this first customer, then there's another customer in optics, and then another customer in optics. Then there are customers in aerospace, and customers in automotive, and we see a commonality. So at that time, when we first have the first customer, we didn't realize that combination of high accuracy, high agility. We just say, oh, nobody can do that, then we can do that, so let's do it. But then later on, we see the commonality of all the requests that we receive and the deal that we successfully closed. We realize that the commonality is the high accuracy, high agility. So that's how we coined the term HAHA, or high accuracy.
And this is an interesting point, I guess, because you did the product development and business development hand in hand, or customer development hand in hand, right? It was not sequential. So that's one unique feature we've seen in all our companies which are successful, that even though they are deep tech companies, they do the product development and customer development hand in hand. By the way, Iinuma-san, this may be a good time to wrap up. That's
maybe let's wrap up here for the first half. And there's still plenty of fascinating contents coming up in the second half. So in the next episode, we'll dive deeper into how Cuong met Kiran and the first investment from UTEC came about. And also we will explore how Eureka Robotics has been expanding business in Japan and the outlook on the future of the robotics industry as well. So stay tuned and see you again next episode.